Members, thank you for joining and feel free to say hello. I'd like to meet you. If you're visiting tonight and enjoy tonight's meeting, please consider joining our not-for-profit organization, which promotes conservation and use of native plants. It's as low as $35 to be a member. I wish to thank Karina and Sergio Gomez, who helped set up the coffee and refreshments. They always doing a bang-up job. There is a jar if you want to put change or even $1 in to help pay for future coffee and refreshments. I know that's antiquated, the idea of having cash. Karina, maybe we could work on Zelling or something like that. You could get reimbursement for refreshments you contribute either directly or as raffle tickets. So I want to thank the plant raffle donors, especially Raul, who also grows all our plants for our online store. Similarly, when you bring in a plant, you can exchange it for a raffle ticket for each plant brought in. All money brought in from raffle ticket sales goes toward the organization as donations. Many of these, I already mentioned Raul. If you wish to buy raffle tickets, people selling raffle tickets, please raise your hands. Karina's selling. She's not raising her hand, though. All right. So you see the nice lady with the maroon shirt. She'll be selling you raffle tickets. How much are they, Karina? Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, you should buy 12. I mean, come on, guys. Please also note that there are books for sale, and we have 2 vendors tonight. I really want you guys to support our speaker, and you can buy books from Michelle, who's in the back corner there. She's waving her hand. And Roger, if you're good, he'll sign your book for you. Right, Roger?
Yeah, Visa or MasterCard.
Okay. You can pay with Visa or MasterCard. Similarly, we sell books, the chapter does, and some of them are old, rare books. And we also have gloves. You know, everyone should have a pair of gloves and a backup pair of gloves. So they're $5 for these great gloves that you could throw in your washing machine. I encourage you all to buy them. Okay, some announcements. I do want to announce that we do have a new secretary, Carmen Ferriero. She's not here tonight, is she? So she's a new board member. I did hear from our past secretary, Lydia Cooney, and she moved to Lower Alabama and got 6 inches of snow. And she said she tried driving down the road to go to work, and there were cars blocking the road because they couldn't drive in the snow. And but she's doing well. She's in LA, right, at Lower Alabama. This Saturday, we have a work day at Everglades National Park. Go ahead, Patty. All right, well, thank you, Alan. It's good. Cool. So member Alan Scott was the one that started it all. Awesome. Oh, nice. So you can get into Everglades for free after you volunteer. The benefits of giving back to your community. There is a deadline for anyone who wishes to apply for a conservation grant, the FNPS conservation grant. It's on February 8th. Unfortunately, I dropped the ball. The board's not going to meet in time, but if it's something you want to send it to me by like Monday, we might be able to fast track something if it's worthwhile. If you want details of what types of grants are conservation grants, it is a wonderful program that the Florida Native Plant Society promotes. We have research grants and conservation grants. And I think the amount is up to, is it $5,000 or something? Right, depends on the project and other competitors. So on February 15th, there's a landscape tour at Camp Matacumbe Playground. And the details are in the newsletter. Unless anyone has anything to add. Camp Matacumbe is next to Matheson Hammock. Not far from, no, that's Camp Mahachi. What's Camp Matacumbe? That's next to Nixon Smiley. Yeah, next to Tamiami, what was called the airport formerly known as Tamiami Airport. That's right. Sorry, guys. We will be having a chapter table at the Castello Hammock Open House event on February 16th. If you wish to volunteer to help out, contact Patty Ferris. If you're new to stuff like that, it's easy, and all you have to do is come with a smile, maybe wear deodorant, and you're welcome. Okay. Our next chapter meeting is on February 25th. It will be Josephine Woodmansee, who will be presenting a program. She's a teacher at Biotech High School. Her program's entitled Growing Young Minds Through Native Plant Restoration Gardens. So she'll talk about her experience with her students and recreating a pine rockland garden at the school. On February 23rd, we'll have a field trip to Navy Wells Pineland in Miami-Dade County. That's kind of near Robert is here. And this will be led by Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden biologist Noah, I think it's pronounced Friday. Is that right, Ricky? Yes, Friday. This field trip is sort of in conjunction with an event that the Palm Beach County chapter is holding on February 22nd. They have a native plant expo, and they've invited we're sort of neighboring chapters to participate, and also members are welcome to go check it out. I think George Gann, who was a former DADE member, will be one of their major speakers at that event. So it should be a good event. And on March 22nd, put this on your calendar for sure, is our 27th annual Native Plant Day. We will be meeting for that as well. Jeannie, are you handling volunteers? Are you handling volunteers, or is it you? Ricky, see Ricky. But it is this month or 2 months. This is March. From April 2nd to 6th is the FNPS 43rd conference. It used to be annual, but they missed out during that whole COVID stuff. And I think it's been like 6 years at least since they had one. It's going to be up in Gainesville, Florida. Registration is open, and I think their discount ends soon. So you might want to check it out, or if you're planning on going, you'll have to pay a more expensive rate. Okay. I also wish to announce that even though Patty Ferris is going to this wonderful event in Castello Open House, we still are trying to fulfill some positions. And one of them is the chair of the Education and Outreach Committee. This is a committee without a leader right now. There's lots of members on this committee, at least 3 or 4. And if anyone, again, who has got a good smile and is somewhat organized, again, going back to civilization, when people contribute back to their communities, and we all have a duty to give back to our community. So if any of you feel like you want to help out your community, please contact me if you think you might be interested in becoming chair. Now, you might see, what does that involve? It's easy. It's just like 6 events a year, maybe more. It all depends upon your vision for that committee. So we'll help you out, but please consider volunteering and being a leader with us. Okay. Our election for the chapter is in May. So I just wonder if any of you feel like there's a couple board slots that'll be open. And if any of you feel like you want to be part of the leadership, for now, let me know, but I'm not going to be part of the nominating committee. I will pass it along to when we find a chair. So far, no one on the board has said, I'll be chair. No one's done that yet. Are there any other announcements? All right. I'll begin with the raffle descriptions, and then we'll have our speaker. So I like this selection of plants. There's not too many, but there's really nice selection. We have here we have two young wand goldenrod. So this is a native wildflower. It's a perennial, although sometimes it dies back a little bit in the winter. It'll produce a beautiful yellow spike that gets maybe up to maybe 3 or 4 feet tall. The old name, which I know it is Solidago stricta. I know it's changed. I forget the new one. But this is a great pine rockland species. It also grows in prairies and is found throughout South Florida. It needs full sun. It does attract lots of pollinators. We have a wonderful plant here. This is a little baby native passion vine. I knew this as Passiflora suberosa. This is now changed to Passiflora pallida. And as I say, every time a plant name changes, a grad student gets their degree. This is the larval host plant for at least 3 different butterflies. You probably know them. One of them is our state butterfly, the zebra longwing, but also the Julia longwing and the Gulf fritillary. And then this is a real nice one that we're developing a new sign for. This is Seaside or Keys ageratum. It's a state listed taxa. It's a state endangered. I believe it's endemic to the lower Keys. Ageratum maridimum or litorale. Yeah, okay, but it's like maybe it's South Florida thing. Maybe it's in Flamingo. This has real pretty purple flowers, and I've seen it growing in pretty dense shade, blooming shade. So for a wildflower, you know, for many of us have our yards full of plants. This one's not bad to try where there's a lot of shade. This is a coastal species, but it might tolerate moderate amounts of salt wind, but it won't tolerate inundation for long periods of time. So that's Seaside ageratum. And it is mostly an annual, I think. It dies in my yard. This is Simmons aster. This is a lovely, and one of them's in bloom. They bloom predominantly in January. But this is a classic sunflower relative. This is Cynthia trichum simmonsii. And this will usually grow where its feet are a teeny bit wet, but it does fine without any water. This grows in short hydroperiod prairies and in pinelands. And we have some wonderful native grasses. If you have a pine rockland garden, you really need to install grasses. This is Raul asked me not to tease him, but you have 2 species here. They're wonderful species. Both of them you need in your yard. So this one is, and they go well together. You have a Dichynthelium acicularia, which is the narrow leaf witchgrass, and there's little baby Scutellarias in there. So that's the Havana skullcap, which is an endangered wildflower. And he's got some other grasses. You really need to applaud Raul for growing these grasses, because when nurseries try to grow them, no one buys them, they stop growing them. So the Native Plant Society is providing that function for pine rockland restoration. Then we have another combo of Phyllanthus pentaphyllus and then Rhizomatous bluestem. The Phyllanthus pentaphyllus is the common name it's a horrible common name. It's like Florida 5-petaled leaf flower. Okay. Rhizomatous blue stem at least rolls off the tongue. It just fills an area, and you can harvest it and use it to scarecrow in the fall. And here we have Chamaecrista nictitans. This is the hairy partridge pea, and that's a host plant for at least some butterflies. This used to be in the genus Cassia. It's got real pretty yellow flowers. They're not as big as some of the other Chamaecristas, but it'll produce more of them on the short stalk. And then we also have another graminoid, which is not a grass. This is the one of our native white top sedges, Rhynchospora colorata. This will have a bloom spike that'll have a top that has these white bracts. And this is actually visited by pollinators. This is one of the few monocot grass graminoids that's actually visited by pollinators. So it's technically a wildflower. And we have this nice tree here. This is a gumbo limbo, Bursera cymaruba. It's a native tropical tree. It's got photosynthetic bark. That's why you'll see it green, and it'll often develop this peeling bark on top of it. And this is also sometimes called a living fence post tree, where you can whack this off and stick it in the ground and it'll root and survive. And of course, that was highly advantageous in areas where they have lots of termites, because termites usually attack dead wood, not living wood. And this one has very sticky sap and is a great hammock tree. You'll want some space for it. And we have one of our native palms that grows in the extreme southern tip of Florida in the Keys. This is Florida thatch palm, which is Thrinax radiata. And palms are one of your best pollinator attractors. They don't really get a lot of mentions. They usually bloom more than once per year. And when they bloom, everyone comes to the party. So if you ever notice, you sit outside and relax in your yard. If you look at your saw palmetto flowers, your sable palm flowers, your Thrinax flowers, your Phocothrinax flowers, they are visited by all kinds of native bees and wasps and all the good stuff. And here we have a privet cinna, which is Cinna ligustrina. And this is a host plant for, I think, at least 3 sulfur butterflies. One of my favorites, the cloudless sulfur. It's a yellow butterfly. This is similar to the hairy partridge pea. It's in the same family and even in the same subfamily. They have sisselpinoid flowers, so they're yellow and they look kind of like a vanda flower if you're into orchids. And what's interesting is the caterpillars eat the leaves. They tend to be green. And if they're on the flowers and they eat the flowers, they'll be yellow so that they're not easily seen. And here we have another native pine rockland grass. This is a real pretty one. I'm glad Growl's growing this. This is a Sporobolus junceus, also known as piney woods drop seed. It'll have a bloom spike in the fall, and it'll look like a little miniature Christmas tree, kind of a purple Christmas tree. Very pretty little grass. It's a clumping grass. It won't take over, but it's a nice accent to your pine rockland garden. And grasses, a lot of the native grasses are also great host plants. They don't really get a lot of press, but even the evil St. Augustine that we all want to get rid of in our lawns is a host plant to 6 butterflies. So it's not really evil. All right, here we have Symphyotrichum domosum, which is rice button aster. This is a perennial aster like the other Symphyotrichum, and it gets similar size. So it's only going to get about maybe this tall, but the bloom spike might get a little bit bigger. They're very similar looking. And here we have an evening primrose, if I'm not mistaken. The common name listed here is bee balm. Oenothera simulans, isn't that evening primrose? Yeah. This will have yellow flowers and real pretty little native. It generally comes up in the winter and then it kind of disappears and then comes back in the winter. Here we have Fakahatchee grass, which is here listed as gamma grass. It's a native bunch grass. It grows on the edge of the hammocks and wetlands. So this will get big and wide. and really common in commercial landscapes, or it was at one point. It's a great grass to add a little bit of texture to your yard. Right, getting toward the end. I brought in some Seminole pumpkin seeds. They were popular last time. You get like 50 or 100 in here. So if you plant that many in your yard, you're crazy. This thing has an edible fruit. It's technically not really native because it's a cultivated plant cut down by the Seminole Indians. And this will take over your yard. You don't really need to do anything unless you live like where there's like no insects at all. If you do, you might need to hand pollinate the flowers. The male flowers come out first, and then the female flowers come out. If you get them and you need instructions, I've written something down which I can share with you. But if you've ever tried to grow other squashes down here for food, they're hard to grow. Like everything destroys them. If you try to grow butternut squash or acorn squash, but this thing is bulletproof. Nothing kills it. And you'll have these little tan pumpkins, and they're not as not as much flesh as you would buy like a commercial, but they're tasty. They taste like a butternut squash. They're really easy to cook, and you can store them in your house in the air condition for a year. They're really no brainer. I'm glad someone brought this. No one really plants sable palms when they're little, and most nurseries don't sell them because they have a tendency to grow out of the pot. They sink their apical meristem down into the ground as they grow. So if someone were to keep this in the pot, eventually it would start poking out the bottom. And that's probably an adaptive strategy for giant herbivores that used to occur here and would destroy them. So this is our state tree. This is cabbage palm or sable palmetto. And this is probably one of your best pollinator plants. What's nice is you could treat it like a shrub. You put it in the ground, eventually turn into a tree. And in 10 years, you can plant other stuff underneath it. And like I said, this brings everyone to the party. Cedar waxwings, when they fly through, they'll eat the fruit. It's just a great tree. And most people plant them already giant where they harvest them out in the middle of Central Florida. Very few people plant them when they're young. And I encourage people to do that. Here we have our native Ruellia succulenta. This is another pine rockland species. We're wrapping things up. Okay, this is red stopper, Eugenia rhombia. There's several seedlings in here. That's a state endangered tree that grows in the Upper Keys. I think there was a population that might have been at Brickell Hammock at one time. That's gone. That's a real one of my favorite stoppers. It's got a real nice shape. Its bark is sort of skin colored. Stoppers are hard to tell apart, but you can tell that one apart from the white stopper because the bark is much more skin colored or flesh colored rather than white. And last, is this jam being raffled? Okay. So we have some cocoa plum jam, and Suzanne, you made this? So that's pretty nice. Isn't that one, my brother was telling me a story that they used to have a sign in Hinga Trail about cocoa plum seeds having a mild narcotic property. And after that sign was put in, the cocoa plum it was next to was just decimated. Our last plant is Galactia, and it says Pineland milkweed. Galactias are kind of tough to key out, but if I were to call this, I would call this volubilis because of the size of the flowers and the shape of the leaves. But it's a mess right now taxonomically. But it's a native Galactia. Milk peas are also host plants. It's a nice perennial vine. It won't get too big. Has sweet little purple flowers. Small butterflies will visit it as well as bees. So that's a rare find. No one carries this. So, and that is it for the raffle. And I will introduce our speaker, who needs no introduction. I remember meeting Roger when I was maybe 15 or something, and he was an old man back then. And but he was Roger's a native-born Floridian. He was born in Cocoa Beach. He tells me he was one of the best surfers in his community, and girls would come knocking on his door and ask to carry his surfboard. Is that true, Roger? He ended up down here and fell in love with South Florida and would explore some of the most wild areas. And he became famous among expert botanists as well as locals. He was director at Castello Hammock Park, and he knew all the old timers that are now gone. And he's really a connection to the past that we're very fortunate to have with us tonight. And I want you all to give a warm welcome to Roger Hammer. Oh yeah, you need the mic.
It could be because Steve was far from there.
First came out in 1982, and that was when this chapter was formed. And I was fortunate then too to receive the first Marjory Stoneman Douglas Award from this chapter. That was also in 1982, I believe. And I was 38 at the time, and Marjory Stoneman Douglas was 92. And after the ceremony at Fairchild Tropical Garden, she invited me to her cottage in Coconut Grove. So I went there, and I was in the living room, and she went into the kitchen, and she yells out, she goes, "Do you want something to drink?" And I said, "Yeah, Marjorie, I'll have whatever you're having, you know." So I'm expecting, iced tea or some Kool-Aid or a glass of water or something. And she comes walking out with 2 shot glasses and a bottle of Desmond and Duff Scotch whiskey, which was her favorite. And she didn't sip her whiskey like a proper woman. She downed it like Festus on Gunsmoke. I always told people, I said, after about 6 shots, she was looking pretty hot. But anyway, our program today is the mystery of plant names. And the way this program came about is because a friend of mine asked me to give a talk at another group. And he just happened to say, he says, "I'll kill myself if I have to listen to another program on native plant gardening or wildflowers and all that," because I guess everybody does those talks. So he says, "Try to come up with something new," So this was the outcome of it. So let's go ahead and get started. You'll see. Okay, there's 3,317 plants that are native to Florida. There's 1,225 plants that are native to Miami-Dade County, and that includes Elliott Key, by the way. I don't know why we don't trade Elliott Key for the mainland Monroe County and let the whole entire Florida Keys be in Monroe. There are 256 plants that are endemic to Florida, found nowhere else in the world. And Florida more than doubles the number of native orchids found in any other state. And it was native orchids that got me into wildflowers in the first place when Dr. Carlisle Lure's book came out in 1972, The Native Orchids of Florida. And that was all I wanted to do, was go find these 100+ orchids. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Hello. So anyway, it was the orchids that got me involved in all of this. And over the years, I discovered 2 orchid species that were not known in Florida before, and got Carlisle Lure to come over from Sarasota and identify them. So that was kind of cool. Okay, so in 1735, Carl Linnaeus created the binomial nomenclature system that we're using today. When he wrote books in Latin, he Latinized his own name, and he became Carolus Linnaeus. And the genus is usually Greek, and the species is usually Latin. And I looked it up, and Roger Hammer Latinized would be Rogelius malleus. I think malleus is referring, of course, to a mallet because they probably didn't have the word hammer back then. Okay, let's get started here. So this is General Roy Stone, and he was an American soldier, a civil engineer. Oh, okay. So he a civil engineer and inventor, and he served as a Union general in the Civil War, distinguished himself during the Battle of Gettysburg, and took part in the Spanish-American War. So this is General Roy Stone here. And he is honored by the genus Roystonia, the royal palm. So he first reported these trees in Cuba, and that's why he was honored with them, because nobody knew about them until then. And the Florida royal palm is Roystonia regia, and the species name is Latin for royal. And this photo I took in the Fakahatchee Swamp. And Jamaican dogwood, Pisidia piscipula, both of those words refer to kill fish. And that's referring to the rotenone in the leaves used to stun or kill fish. It's illegal to do that in the United States. Another common name is fish poison tree. Then we have Joe wood. In the Bahamas, they call it Cudjoe wood. And so Jacquinia honors Austrian physician and botanist Nicholas Joseph von Jacquin. And the species name means of the Florida Keys. The flowers are super, super fragrant. If you've never smelled them and you get a chance to, they smell like gardenias. I mean, they're very, very fragrant. And it's kind of interesting. I was in Key West once, and I was walking along the street, and the conch train came by. And the driver of the conch train was stopped and started talking about, you know, where some of the Keys names came from. And he said there was a guy that lived in Key West that moved to an uninhabited island, and when his family members went to visit him, they would go to Cousin Joe's Key. And he said that that's where Cudjoe Key came from. And I'm going, no. It's actually named after the Joe wood, from Cudjoe wood in the Bahamas. Okay, the Passion of Christ. In Christian legend, the Passion is the period in the life of Jesus leading up to his execution by crucifixion. And that's an event central to Christian beliefs. So the passion flower, the Jesuit priests believed that the passion flower was represented by the 3 nails, the anthers, the crown of thorns, the filaments, and the 10 faithful apostles, the sepals and petals. The other 2 apostles that weren't faithful were Peter and Judas. So this is our native Passiflora incarnata, found nearly statewide except in the Florida Keys. The species name means flesh colored for the fruits. And it's very, very aggressive in cultivation. So if you buy one, you want to plant it in your neighbor's yard. What it does, it suckers from the roots and comes up everywhere. But it's a larval host plant, so go ahead. And Ocoee, the Seminole name for Passiflora incarnata was Ocoee, which meant apricot place, because they thought that the fruits tasted like apricots. And that is the name source of the town of Ocoee up in Orange County. And then we run through some of the native species here. This is the corky stem passion flower. Everybody probably knows this one, Passiflora tuberosa. It's actually well behaved. It's kind of a petite little vine. The flowers are tiny, the fruits are small, birds eat the fruits, and it's the host plant for the zebra, the Julia, and the Gulf fritillary butterflies. And the species name of the superosa, that means corky, for the bark that's corky. I photographed this picture in our yard. Zebra longwings roost in groups at night. And they hang on this. There's a palm that had a long, like a streamer coming off the leaves that hangs straight down. So they all hung on to it. And I think I quit counting at 70 of them. So go out at night and look. And this is the Keys passion flower, Passiflora multiflora, and it's found in Florida only in the Florida Keys. And it's a state-listed endangered species. And the species name means many flowers. And Passiflora pallens, I photographed this in Castello Hammock. It's found in Florida only in Broward, Collier, Miami-Dade, and the Monroe County mainland. And this also state-listed endangered, and the species name means pale. Very showy one.
And the fruit on this are really cute. They're like little tiny balloons.
And this is goat's foot, Passiflora sexflora. It's found in Florida only in Miami-Dade County and state-listed endangered, and the species means 6 flowers, which is it more often than not produces in a cluster. Diamondback rattlesnakes are in the genus Crotalus, which is Greek for rattle. And the genus Crotalaria is taken from that. The genus Crotalaria was taken from the rattlesnake genus Crotalus for the seeds that rattle in the pods. And the species of this one means small. So this is the little low creeping one that you generally see out in the Everglades. And Elytris was a legendary Greek slave who ground grain. And she was honored by the genus Elytris for the mealy texture of the flowers. This is the one you're going to see here in Miami-Dade County, is Elytris bracteata. The common name relates to the medicinal use of some species to treat colic, which is when babies cry forever. And the species name refers to the floral bracts. And what's odd here is this is yellow colic root, and it ranges down into the Big Cypress National Preserve. But you step across in the sign that says Everglades National Park, and this species disappears, and the previous species is in the Everglades. So that's the dividing line. The other one, this one is in Big Cypress, and the other one's in Everglades. But this one grows well farther north. Then we have the beach spider lily, Hymenocallis latifolia, and Hymenocallis relates to the hymen-like membrane that's attached to the stamen filaments. And the species name relates to the wide leaves. This is the coastal species that you'll find usually down around mangrove habitats or even beach dunes. Then we have Zephyrus. Zephyrus was the legendary Greek god of the west wind that brings spring rains and flowers. In Greek legend, Zephyrus was jealous of Apollo for his love of Hyacinthus and caused Apollo's discus to veer off course and kill the young boy. So Zephyrus, it shows up in the zephyr lilies or Zephyranthes, and a lot of people call them rain lilies because the flowers often pop out right after rain. The species name means underground for the subterranean bulbs of this species, Zephyranthes adamasca. And then Simpson's zephyr lily, Zephyranthes simpsonii, endemic to Central and South Florida. And the species name honors botanist Joseph Simpson. I don't know if you ever had any of these. These are comparisons of 2 diseases of the tissue around the fingernails. The first one's paronychia, which is bacterial, and the other one's whitlow, which is a virus. And this is Paronychia patula, also called nail wart or whitlow wart, used medicinally by early colonists to treat paronychia and whitlow. And the species of this one means spreading, and it's called sand squares. The flowers open up and form little squares. Pretty cool. Liberato Sabati. He was an Italian botanist and gardener, and he was honored by the genus Sabatia. And marsh pink or rose of Plymouth, Sabatia stellaris. That name Rose of Plymouth came about because up in I guess in New England or wherever, they thought that Sabatia was referring to the Sabbath, but it's not. It's referring to Liberato Sabati. The species name means star-like in reference to the flowers. This is fairly common in the Everglades. And Chief Osceola. Osceola was born Billy Powell, but he took the Creek name Osceola during the Second Seminole War, which was later transliterated to Osceola. And he was of Irish, Scottish, Creek ancestry. And if you notice his headdress there with the big long feathers there, this species is supposed to resemble that. This is Osceola's plume, Sthenanthium densum. The flower cluster was thought to resemble the plume feathers worn by Osceola, the war chief of the Seminole tribe. And skull caps. This is a type of military helmet worn during the Roman Empire. And these flowers resemble it. This is the Florida scrub skullcap, Scutellaria erinicola, named for the resemblance of the flowers to a skullcap. And the species name means inhabiting sand. So you'll see this in sandy areas usually farther north in Florida. And Hippocrates, if you remember him from school in history, he was a Greek physician often referred to as the father of medicine. So Hippocrates was honored by the genus Hippocratia. I photographed this along Mahogany Hammock Trail, the boardwalk in Everglades National Park. It's named to honor Hippocrates. The species name refers to twining, and it's used medicinally for memory enhancement and as an antioxidant. And this is Pedanius Dioscorides, Greek physician, pharmacologist, and botanist. And here's our native Florida yam, Dioscorea floridana. And it's closely related to the category 1 invasive air potato, Dioscorea bulbifera. And the species name means of Florida. I once wrote an article about Dioscoreas for the Wildland Weeds, which is the Florida Invasive Species Council's magazine. And I titled it, Florida Has a Bad Case of Dioscorea. But there are two native ones. And this is Aesculapius, the Greek god of medicine. The staff of Aesculapius entwined by a snake is still the modern symbol of medicine. And in Greek mythology, Aesculapius was killed by a lightning bolt from Zeus, the Greek god of sky and thunder. And it, of course, came about for the genus Asclepius. This is Asclepius viridis. It's found down here, and I've even seen it in Big Pine Key. The species name means green. I photographed this one at Larry and Penny Thompson Park, but you'll see it scattered around in other parks.
But this one is one of the ones that lights fire.
Yeah, it'll bloom within weeks after fire.
So they'll pop up like crazy if it's in a place where it's been burned.
And this one is Asclepius fei. It's endemic. The species name honors botanist William Fay. A friend of mine once told me where this plant was, and it was in Myakka River State Park. So I drove there, and he says, be prepared because you have to walk about 2 miles. And I went, oh, great, it's in the summertime, and so I parked there, and the gate was closed, so I had to walk from where I parked. But this white truck pulled up, and a guy got out, and I said, hi. I said, do you work here? And he goes, no. He says, there's a backhoe that's broke down in here. I'm just come by to fix it, and there was a combination lock there. And he dialed the combination and unlocked it and drove in and just hung the lock there. So I walked over there and looked at the numbers, waited, and then here he comes back out and locks it again. So I went over there, and so it wasn't a 2-mile hike, it was a 2-mile drive. The sandhill milkweed, Asclepius humistrata, the species name means sprawling and refers to its growth habit. I photographed this up in Paynes Prairie, and while there, I photographed the wild bison that are there. A lot of people don't realize that bison were at one time indigenous or native here in Florida. Something you don't really picture.
One thing that they say about this is if you plan on taking pictures of it, make sure you can outrun them.
Yeah, I actually asked the ranger how close I could get to take the picture, and he says, depends on how fast you could run. I said, well, that depends on if he's chasing me or not. Swamp milkweed, Asclepias perennis. I actually saw this one time in the Fakahatchee Swamp. The species name means perennial. It seems to be more common farther north in Florida. And the rose milkweed, Asclepias incarnata, the species name means flesh-colored. And butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. The species name relates to the tuberous roots. If you're going to plant these milkweeds to attract butterflies, this one will attract them to the flowers, but the first instar larvae, the larvae that hatch out from the eggs, this plant's too coarse for them to eat. So they'll either eat the flowers, or if it has brand spanking new growth, they'll eat that. But once it matures, that's not a very good host plant unless it's flowering, and they'll eat the flowers.
They all kind of different when they grow it. Something.
And I think this is the last one of the milkweeds, the green comet milkweed, Asclepias viridiflora, and the species name means green flowers. And then Helen of Troy. According to Greek legend, Helena, or Helen of Troy, was the daughter of Zeus and Leda, and her abduction by Prince Paris of Troy caused the Trojan War. She was honored by the genus Helenium. And here's the bitter sneezeweed, Helenium amarum. The Seminole dried the leaves and used them for snuff, and hence the name sneezeweed. And the species name means bitter. Yes, there's a hooker. Jack in the pulpit, Erythema triphyllum. The name Jack was once used in the same manner as John is today for a man who hires a prostitute. So Jack, the spadix, is in the pulpit, the spathe, confessing his sins. And that's where Jack in the pulpit came from. Then we have water nymphs. In Greek mythology, water nymphs lived around rivers, lakes, and streams. They're always depicted as young, beautiful, nude girls. They are honored by the genus Nymphaea. And here's the scented water lilies, Nymphaea odorata. The species name relates to the floral scent, and it is day blooming. In other words, the flowers open during the daytime. And then the elegant water lily, Nymphaea elegans. I photographed this along the Turner River Road in Big Cypress. The species name means elegant. It is day blooming. And then Jameson's water lily, Nymphaea jamesoniana. The species name honors Scotch botanist William James. And this one's night blooming. And Michelle and I found this in a state park upstate a ways, and we waited for the flowers to open at night. It was like 10 o'clock at night or something. And I used the headlights on my truck. I hate flash photography. And then we each had LED flashlights, and we held them way back away from it. I took this really long exposure to capture these flowers.
Yeah, between 10 o'clock and midnight, we're standing out there with flashlights, trying to get photos of these things that are out in the water, further away from.
Okay, and lotus, in Hinduism, the lotus is a symbol of divine fertility and spiritual power. Pictured as a Hindu goddess sitting on a sacred lotus flower and holding two American lotus flowers with her extra set of hands. So the other one is pink. This is the American lotus, the native one, Nelumbo lutea. And Nelumbo is Sinhalese for sacred, and the species name means yellow. Well, there's these friends of mine that run airboats. The seed pods on this look like they're kind of big, round, flat, look like a pancake in a way, and there's these big, round, hard seeds in them. And they call them chinky pins. And I thought, what? And so when they're running their airboat through them, the bow of the boat shears off those seed pods, and the seeds go flying through the fan and make this loud, what they call a chinky noise. So they call them chinky pins. These are ibis, white ibis. And scarlet rose mallow, Hibiscus coccineus. The genus Hibiscus is said to come from the Greek ibiscus, for plants that grow where ibis live. And the species name for this one is red. I once bought 2 plants of this upstate, and I think it was Palm Beach County, and I was driving back down the turnpike, and I had them laying in my truck bed, and I was approaching a toll booth, and I thought, oh, wait a minute. I pulled off the road, and I had a tarp, and I pulled the tarp over the plants because the leaves of this plant look exactly like marijuana. And I thought, I don't want her seeing these, and then, here comes the man pulling me over.
That's when the toll booths actually have people in it.
And then the cute little fairy hibiscus, Hibiscus popigii, the species name honors German botanist Eduard Popig. It's a cute little hibiscus. The flowers kind of arch downward. There's some nurseries that grow that. And then Iris. Iris is the legendary Greek goddess of rainbows and the messenger of the gods. And it is said to have, Iris is said to have traveled to Earth on a rainbow. And here's blue flag, Iris savanarum. The species name means growing in savannas. And here's a pregnant woman. And Marsh's Dutchman's pipe, Aristolochia pentandra. Aristolochia means best delivery in Greek for the ancient use to aid in childbirth. And some species are called birthworts. And the species name of this one means 5 anthers. The flowers are pretty putrid smelling if you put your nose close to them. Curdled milk, blue butterwort. The leaves of butterworts were once used to curdle milk for buttermilk. And pinguicula refers to the greasy texture of the leaves. The species name means blue. I can't imagine how they figured out to put the leaves of these plants in milk to make it curdle, but somehow they figured it out. And by the way, that word wort, W-O-R-T, that's an old English word for plant. So in England, that would be yellow butter plant. So this is Pinguicula lutea. The species name means yellow, of course. And then the one that's down here, this is the small butterwort, Pinguicula pumila, and the species name means small. And then here's the PG-13 part. This is sweet-scented pigeon wings, Clitoria fragrans, and Swedish botanist Carolus Linnaeus thought the keel of the flower resembled female genitalia and named the genus Clitoria, and the species name relates to the fragrant flowers. Okay, and the word orchid comes from the Greek orchis, meaning testicles, and it was named for the paired tubers on the roots of a European species in the genus Orchis, such as Orchis ustulata. And here's Orchis ustulata. This is for comparison. This is the butterfly orchid, of course, and Encyclia tampensis, and Encyclia means to encircle, for the lateral lobes of the lip that encircle the column. And the name tampensis relates to the Tampa Bay region where it was first discovered in 1846. So this orchid only grows in Florida and in the Bahamas in the wild. And then the worm vine orchid, Vanilla barbellata. Vanilla is from the Spanish vanilla, or small pod, and the species name means somewhat bearded. And I put that basketball there because a friend of mine, I'd photographed this along the Hells Bay Canoe Trail in Everglades National Park, and a friend of mine wanted to go photograph it, and it was in May or early June. And I told him, I said, bring a basketball with you. And he goes, oh, why is that? And I said, well, you're going to need to throw the basketball through the mosquitoes and take the picture through the hole. And I wasn't lying. Now we have Euphorbus. Euphorbus was a legendary Greek physician for King Juba II of Namibia, honored by the genus Euphorbia. And here's our endemic deltoid spurge. This is only found in southern Miami-Dade County in the world, and it's federal and state listed endangered species. I photographed that in Larry and Penny Thompson Park. And then down in the Keys, here's Euphorbia deltoidea subspecies serpylum, endemic to the lower Florida Keys, mostly Big Pine Key. It's federal and state listed endangered species. We're almost finished here. This is Big Pine spurge, Euphorbia ogdenii, endemic to Big Pine Key and nearby keys. State listed endangered species described in 2022. And that's John Ogden, the ornithologist. He used to be our next door neighbor. He passed away in 2012, right next door to us. And then Everglades spurge, Euphorbia hammeri. It's endemic to rocky glades in the Everglades region. It's state listed endangered species and was described also in 2022 by friends of mine. And they had me go out and take that picture for their publication, and I didn't know they were going to name it after me, but they did. And I called it the Everglades spurge because, you know, it's found in the Everglades, but I have some gay botanist friends and they all call it Rogers gay spurge. And I thought, well, I'll take that as a compliment. So, well, that's all, folks. Any questions out there?
All right, someone get the light. Move the light. Hey, Roger, do you have time to take a few questions?
Yeah.
Rogers gay spurge.
What?
I didn't get the last joke.
Oh. Well, those euphorbias are commonly called spurges. And I wrote an article about it for the Palmetto, and I called it Everglades spurge. But then my gay botanist friends are calling it Rogers gay spurge.
I don't get it.
But yeah.
A question about that fruit on the Passiflora
And
tuberosa. It looked a little odd. It didn't look edible. On the one on your photo, it looked more like a Christmas thing.
The tuberosa has these little tiny, they're about 3/8 of an inch or so,
Yeah,
little
yeah,
purple fruits.
yeah. But the one on your photo looked like it was a Christmas. Oh,
Yeah, that was you know kind of close up. You know, I work occasionally, or have worked occasionally, as a survivalist instructor on Naked and Afraid, and some of the stuff that they say is edible, you know, requires you to be naked but presumably afraid, and maybe in week 2, you know, they have to spend 3 weeks out there, you know, naked and try to survive, and you know, some of the stuff that they. But I worked on one episode up in Lake County. And there's a morning glory up there called Ipomea pandurata, and it's called Man of the Earth. And it has this big tuberous root under the ground. Well, the sweet potato is a morning glory. And this looks just like one, you know, and although the flesh inside is white. And boy, they threw those on the campfire and baked them, and man, they were happy campers because it you know, it's like real food. So. Any other questions out there? Well, I appreciate you. Oh, yeah.
Are there bladderworts in Florida?
Yes. There's a number of species. There's a purple flowered one, and then there's a whole bunch of yellow flowered ones. I've never tried eating any, but yeah, they're there. In fact, if you go off, you know, the Mahogany Hammock Trail, you know, there's a boardwalk that goes to the hammock from the parking lot, and if you look right over the edge there, there's 2 species there, the purpurea and another one of the yellow flowered ones. And speaking of that, let me tell you this funny thing real quick. I went to Everglades National Park, and I walked into the Pineland Trail, which is just past Long Pine Key. And that trail just does a big loop and comes back out. And I was there to look for a check on a rare orchid that grows there. So I just saw it, and then came back out. And when I came out in the parking lot, there was this woman and a man in a car there, and they saw me, and the woman jumps out, and she's running straight towards me, and she's like yelling, "Sir, sir." I went, "Yes, ma'am." She goes, "We just heard a Florida panther." And I said, "Well," I said, "it's pretty rare to see one. It's even rarer yet to hear one." She goes, "Hang on. I recorded it on our phone." So she goes and gets her phone, and she goes back and she plays it, and I hear, "Caw, caw." And I said, "Ma'am, that's a crow." And she looks at me and she goes, "Are you sure?" And then I said, "Where are you from?" And she goes, "Ohio." So there you go. Oh, well, I'll tell you one more real quick. Not long after that, I was down in Key Largo, and I was in John Pennekamp State Park, and I was working on the book back there called Forage in Florida, and I wanted to photograph this little vine called Chew Stick, where you can chew on it and use it as a toothbrush. And so I was on the trail, and I saw it, and I was setting up my camera, and this lady, there's a bend in the trail, and this lady screams like Jack the Ripper just jumped out of a tree on her back. I mean, just blood-curdling scream. And I thought, oh my God. So I go running around there expecting to see something god awful. And she sees me and she goes, "Sir, look out, there's a crocodile." Now we're in the hammock. And I said, "Where?" And she goes, "Right there." And I looked down there, I said, "Ma'am, that's an iguana."
Roger, you have to tell the story of the baby man.
Oh, okay. I was at Caslow Hammock early in the morning, and the phone rings, and this lady's on the phone, and she goes, "Yes." She goes, "I live on Key Biscayne, and I was on the beach, and I found a baby manatee, and I brought it home, and I need to know who to get this baby manatee to help it, rehab it." And I said, where do you have this manatee, ma'am?" And she goes, "It's in my kitchen sink." And I thought, my God, woman, how big is your sink? So she describes it to me, and she goes, "Yeah, when I push on it, water squirts out, And I said, "Ma'am," I said, "that's a sea cucumber." Yeah, and that's what it was. It was a sea cucumber, the baby manatee. So anyway.
Thank you, Roger.
Yeah, thank you, man.
I'm gonna help you with your mic. Brian, you stop the YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so there's still refreshments in the back. You can also buy raffle tickets for Miss Sabrina, and we'll start the raffle in about 5 or 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Bye, Roger.